Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio. I was in the mood to paint something really different than I've ever done before. So today, let's give these fun and easy silhouette flowers a try. And the reason I say easy is because since the flowers are pretty much just black, we are not going to have to worry about shading or making them look realistic. We just get to have some fun. So along with my watercolor paper, paints, paper towel, and some clean water, I have two round brushes I'll be using. The brand is Artegria, the small is a number 6 and the large a number 12. And alongside some of the colors that we will be using that are already on my palette, we'll go over the names in just a minute, I'm going to add just a touch of Paynes gray to my tray to help with today's painting. And as a side note, any supplies, names, brands, etc. that you see me using today will be listed in the description of this video if you'd like to look into that further. Now, as I mentioned in last week's tutorial on transparent layered flowers, if you watched that, if you haven't, you really need to go back and take a look. But even when I'm doing more of a free-handed style painting like I am today, I still like to have drawn at the very least some stem lines for the flowers or even the grass, just to help me get started with my composition. So first I have drawn the 4 main stems for the 4 flowers I plan to have. And then in between and off to the sides of those, I'll make a few more marks here and there for some grassy features in the background. Now, yours does not have to be exactly like mine, and in fact, you don't have to have a base drawing at all if you don't want to. And even though this is a pretty simple outline to draw, I will put an outline of this as well as last week's transparent layered flowers on my Etsy shop if that would be helpful to you. Now, originally, I wasn't actually planning on drawing any sort of flower head. I was just going to wing it. But last minute, I changed my mind because I felt like it might be helpful for you to see sort of what I have in mind before we start throwing some paint on here. We're really just focusing on a basic, loose outline shape of a flower's profile view, nothing too detailed or fancy. Okay, now that we've got a rough idea of what our painting will be like, let's tape our paper down and get to it. Let's get a few colors on our tray. So first I'll add a little bit of water to this Paynes gray that I have here. And then I'll take a little bit of ultramarine blue and some ivory black. Next, let's make a mix of some warmer colors to help with the sunset looking background. I'll start with some cadmium red and maybe add some gamboge to it to make it more of a warm orange, but I do want some gradient of color, so I'll have some pure gamboge as well, a mixture of the two colors for the orange, and I think I'll add a little bit of extra cadmium red for a darker, more red-orange. So let's paint in a nice background wash using these colors. But first, let's wet down this bottom area of the painting with water. This is just going to be at the bottom of the page, around the stems that we've drawn, and I'm not painting this past the flower heads, just about to the bottoms of the flowers. Now we'll paint in some of the yellows and oranges along this top area. The idea here will be to work our way from the light values down to the dark values. So keep the colors nice and light, and in fact feel free to add in some extra water to dilute and soften these warm colors even more. I think I'll even come back in here with just some water on my brush and soften the top of this section to get rid of any hard lines. Now, while that first layer is still wet, let's add in some darker oranges, including the red orange we've mixed up. I'll add this into the middle area, blending it slightly into the top lighter wash. Then down here at the bottom, we'll add in the darker colors, some of the ultramarine blue first, and be careful with the blue. Try not to overwork this color or blend it in too much with the reds and oranges, or it might turn into a muddy brown color instead. Then I'll add in the Paynes gray next, which has a bluish tint to it. I'll even spread this color clear to the bottom of the page. Then lastly, we'll add in the nice dark ivory black at the very bottom of the page, blending it into the Paynes gray. Now, even though these oranges and reds are the colors I've chosen for the background of this silhouette, you really can use any colors you'd like to complement with the dark Paynes gray and the ivory black. All right, I feel like I need to balance out this background a little bit. So I'm actually going to wet down this upper right-hand corner with water, and then I'll add a little bit of Paynes gray first, followed by a hint of ivory black. Also, as a tip, you'll notice I've got some hard edges going on here. So to soften those up, I'll just take my paper towel and dab at those hard lines. Now, a fun thing to add to our background, but also is a little tricky because the timing has to be just right, I'd like to add in some blobs of color to this background that can represent some plants or grasses. But we need to do this while the paper is still slightly damp so that the color will fade and blur around the edges, giving it the look of these plants being more in the distant background. I'm using the Paynes gray for this first, and I'm just dabbing dots of color into little groups. The key here is to have the paper slightly damp to the touch without it being really wet. In fact, it's probably closer to being almost dry. So here's the thing. If your paper is dry, you can still paint these in. They just are going to be more crisp in the look instead of blurred. And it's also okay if you try this and your paper's too wet. It's just going to blend into your background, and you can wait a few more minutes and then try again. So don't stress this too much. Then after my initial marks are made with the Paynes gray, I think I'll add in just a little bit of ivory black to some of the centers as well to help parts of these plants stand out a little bit more. Then when you're done, let it dry completely before we move on to the next step. All right, before I get fully into painting the silhouette pure black, I'd like to add a few small plants or grass that are more of an orangey color to make them almost look like they're glowing from the light of the sunset background. So using my small brush, I'll paint a couple of grass lines followed by a thin stem or two with some small leaves. And as you paint the leaves, you could even try adding a hint of gray or black to them to help create shadow and dimension. But that is definitely an optional step. When I get closer to the top of this little plant, I think I'll switch over to the Paynes gray for these leaves and then add in touches of orange instead. All right, we are now at a point where we can paint any grass, stems, or flowers using only black or gray paint. I'll start off using some ivory black for a fun little plant that's off to the side here. These are kind of just blobby shapes, a little more loose or abstract in appearance, which makes them easy to paint. I'll paint these shapes moving downward toward the bottom of the page. Then I'll come back in here and draw a thin stem line peeking through the shapes to really tie it together. I'll go ahead and make a few more grassy plants here in the center of the page, this time with more of the thin stem showing, or maybe even just some long grass pieces. With less of the blobs and frills, this is going to make him look a little bit more delicate. If you are enjoying this painting so far, I hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss out on any new and upcoming tutorials where I teach you weekly tips and tricks to help you create stunning pieces of artwork. All right, now let's paint in the 4 main flower stems down to the bottom of the page. And if you feel so inclined, you can add a leaf or two along 1 or 2 of the stems. When it's time to paint the heads of the flowers, let's start by painting the basic shape of the flower petals with just water first. Then we'll add in the paint. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this, so pick whatever you're most comfortable with. You can paint these using just the ivory black, similar to the grass, and keep it one solid dark color. Or you can choose a step slightly more challenging and add somewhat a gradient of the blacks and paint the top portion of the petals with the Paynes gray, and then transition to the ivory black at the bottom of the flower and sort of blend them together in the middle. Now, I am probably still going to use more of the ivory black as a dominant color and just have hints of the lighter Paynes gray, but these are just all ideas. You're the artist here, and you can try whatever you like. And that's it for today's flower silhouette painting. I hope you had some fun trying something a little different. I personally think it turned out very striking. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.